Welcome to the Governance Audit Committee on today's date, 28th of January 2026. We'll start with apologies for absence. I've not been notified of any apologies for absence, but could I check with Wendy, please? Do we have any apologies?
No, everybody's here, Chair.
Great, thank you. I know that a couple of members need to leave promptly from about 3 or 3:30, but that's fine. Okay, moving swiftly on to declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest to note, please? I can't see Anne Webb, but I understand she has a declaration of interest to note.
Yes.
Would you like to make a declaration now, please, Anne?
Yes, thank you very much. I have a declaration in discussion with regard to Welsh Church Fund, being the chairman. Thank you very much.
I'm also a committee member of that same committee.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. There being no other declarations of interest to note, we will note those two as set out. Moving on to the public open forum. This is the opportunity whereby members of the public may make written or verbal representations to this committee. I've not been notified of any such representations, so unless Wendy advises to the contrary, we can move on to the action list. I need to change screens. If we look at the action list, we have 3 outstanding actions. The first action is with Richard Jones, who's going to provide an update to this committee in due course in respect of the commissioning framework. Richard, have you got an anticipated date when you'll bring that forward, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. We've added it to your forward work plan for the April meeting, in line with the action from the last session. Just to make you and the committee aware, as committed to from the Audit Wales report, that will be looking to be brought forward by our procurement team in partnership with our collaboration with Ardle. They will likely be the lead on that item when it comes forward. And I'll stay in touch with them in terms of if there needs to be any adjustments to that timing and let you and committee know, Chair, if it needs to be adjusted. But that's the current plan, is your April meeting.
Thank you. That's fine. The second action is in respect of updated valuations in relation to Cascade Business Park. John Davis, Head of Finance, are you able to indicate when that will go to performance and overview, please?
Afternoon, everyone. Yeah, the report is now on the forward work plan. I believe it's really April. So we'll ensure that that action is taken up and included within that report that goes.
Thank you, John. The third action is in relation to the Ombudsman's annual letter, which we considered at our last committee meeting. I have seen the monitoring officer's email. Hopefully all members have the opportunity to see that email as well, and assume we are content unless people shout. I think we're all good. Thank you for that. Let's move on to the next item, that being item 5. Item 5 is the audited or examined statement of accounts 24-25 for 2 named charitable trust funds. If I initially asked John Davis, Head of Finance, to introduce the item, setting out the background and conclusions, and then hand over to Steve Wyndham from Audit Wales to give the Audit Wales view. Hopefully members are content with that approach, so over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair. So hopefully quite a straightforward report for the committee, mainly because the draft statements for these trust funds were brought in the autumn, in September, to this meeting, and they were considered prior to that audit and inspection process being carried out. Pleased to say that those processes now have finished, and we are in good time to make the Charity Commission deadline, which is the end of January, to lodge the relevant documents. In respect of the audit findings, I won't steal too much of Steve Wyndham's thunder on this one, but I think it's fair to say that that the findings were relatively minor, and very much in the misstatement or correction nature that haven't materially impacted the statements that were presented. So at this point now, it's a matter of getting the endorsement of this committee. That is the next step in our role as trustee. And once that's completed, those will be lodged with the Charities Commission. So, Chair, I think quite straightforward from our end. So happy to hand over to Steve to run through the process that Audit Wales have been through on these.
Okay, before Steve comes in, John, may I just double check what you're asking this committee to do in respect to those two sets of accounts? Are you asking us to approve both sets?
So we ask for endorsement of both sets. The Monmouthshire Farm Endowment Trust statements, they simply go to the committee of trustees, and they will give that ultimate approval. With the with the Welsh Church Fund, this is an important step because ultimately, as sole custodian of the Welsh Church Fund, we have that responsibility to ensure that they're signed off and due process is given, and this endorsement from the committee is part of that prior to lodging with the Charities Commission.
Thank you, John. In which case, I'll hand over to Steve to set out Audit Wales' view of the audit and then the accounts. Over to you, Steve.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll talk through the Welsh Church Act Fund report first. I say talk through, it will be quite brief. I think John has set it out quite neatly there in terms of the fact you refer to funder. I don't think that it'd be quite a muted sort of clap of funder, really, I think, to be honest. But I'll take you through the report anyway. The headlines are we've completed our audit work, which is obviously good news at this late stage of the month. And this report, as John has rightly pointed out, is to inform your decision today as to whether you wish to approve these accounts in regard to the Church Act. If I can take you to page 5 of the report, which is page 35 at the pack, there's a one-page summary there, which I think provides a very neat and a good outline of our key findings. Just the headlines, really, in terms of what the report covers. First of which is the fact we intend to issue an unqualified opinion, which is obviously very good news as far as the council and the charitable fund is concerned. The second aspect then is that there are no significant matters that we are reporting, so there's nothing I need to comment on, for instance, things such as poor control arrangements, any qualitative issues which have impeded the audit process or anything of that ilk. There's no matters of that nature to report. And leading on from that, there are no recommendations within the report to raise with you today. Equally, there's no uncorrected misstatements. Everything that's been identified in the audit has been corrected. There are some amendments, and I'll briefly touch on those in a moment. And the final headline, I guess, is subject to approval today. We will certify the accounts tomorrow to support submission, as John rightly says, by the end of this month to the Charity Commission. If I could take you then to the appendices within the report, because that probably covers the areas I probably need to make you aware of. Appendix 1 provides a summary of the risks that we had in our initial audit plan that came to this committee. But this appendix also provides you with an update in terms of our findings in each of those risks. There's nothing I need to bring to your attention in regard to each of those areas, but I think it's useful in terms of completing the loop, in terms of our findings, and you cited then on the outcome of those findings in regard to each of the risks. Appendix 2 then provides a summary of the audit amendments. As you can see, there's very little on there, really. There's one non-material adjustment in regard to the investment balance, And the other adjustments, a bit of a catch-all comment really, because there were just some minor narrative and disclosure amendments of pretty low significance, but just to sort of flag there are other adjustments within the financial statements. And Appendix 3 then is our proposed audit report, which confirms the unqualified opinion. And Appendix 4 finally is the letter of representation that we'll be asking this committee to sign and provide to us to support our certification arrangements tomorrow. That's probably all I wish to say on the Church Act accounts and our audit, but I would like to thank John and the rest of the team, the wider team at the Council, for their support and good engagement to enable us to complete the audit in good time. I don't know if you want me to move on to the farm school, Chair, or pause for questions.
Okay, I can see one hand up. So yeah, let's pause and go to Tony for his comments, please.
Yeah, just a question of whether it's accuracy or not. The trustees are not named on the report. The individual members, should they be on there? They've got the officers and they don't have the individual members. I'm sure they used to have.
I assume you're talking about the actual accounts, statement of accounts themselves, Tony.
Yeah.
I don't know whether John or Steve could comment or point Tony to the right place if indeed they are named.
When I was on the committee, my name was on. Well, and Phil Murphy was on
there. Chair, I can take that away and have a look at that. Not aware of the regulations to ensure that the trustees are named individually, but can certainly look into that prior to lodging these towards the end of this week.
Tony's right, John. They always used to be.
Okay. I suppose the question is whether it's a requirement or whether it's, if it's not a requirement, whether it's a preference of this committee or indeed preference of the trustees themselves. John, if you take it away and I assume advise the trustees accordingly. Thank you. Unless there's anything else, Steve, please continue.
Yes, the farm school, far less to say really. There's a distinction here as well, which I should point out. Whereas the Church Act was a full audit, the farm school is something we call an independent examination. Now, this is still an audit. We still got to satisfy ourselves that the accounts are appropriate and reasonable, but it is a lighter touch. But it is a lighter touch because purely is being proportionate to the scale and size of the charitable fund concerned. So this is in compliance with the Charity Commission requirements. So it's probably worth making that distinction, and hence to explain, I guess, why this report seems a lot lighter in terms of content than the other report. But nevertheless, this report does summarise our findings, and I suppose the headlines to communicate here, there are no significant issues. There were some very minor corrections, but low on number and certainly low on materiality. So they aren't actually specified within the body of the report, hence, which probably gives you a good depiction of the sort of scale of the errors concerned. They were very minor. And finally, we do intend to issue an unqualified opinion when we certify tomorrow. So yeah, that covers the ground, I believe, on that report. We're very happy to take any questions you might have on that, or indeed looking back at the Church Act accounts report.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Thank you, John. All of that sounds really positive, and pleased, of course, that we have an unqualified opinion. I'd say on both sets of accounts, but the word unqualified is an incorrect term. But look, a clean opinion for both sets of accounts. So excellent work, Steve. Please pass on our thanks to you and to your team. Also, John, please pass on the thanks of this committee to your team as well. I do recognise the amount of work that they get through in terms of delivering these accounts.
And if you noticed, all the named trustees are there.
Yes, your point's well made, Tony. John's taken that away.
Yeah. No, I say they're on this one.
Okay. I'm not seeing any of the hat. Go on, Tony.
No, just a comment, that's all. Forget it. It's okay.
Okay.
So-
Okay. I'm not seeing any of the hands up, so unless there's any voices to the contrary, please, for the record, Wendy, note for this committee endorses both sets of accounts, and we will sort of sign off the letters of representation as appropriate. Okay, if we move on to the next agenda item, please. The next agenda item is, apologies, working off one screen, which is not ideal. Item 6 is the Audit Wales Work Programme Council Progress Update. I understand that this item will be introduced by Hannah Carter, our performance analyst, and Richard Jones as well, our data and insight manager. So Richard and Hannah, please lead off.
Thanks, Chair. So I'll just start and then Richard can come in if he needs to then. So afternoon, everyone. I'm here to present you with the Audit Wales Work Programme Progress Report. So this provides you with an update on progress made in implementing and responding to both local and national Audit Wales reports up to January 26. So members are asked to scrutinise the Council's response to the recommendations, and to note you can also refer as a committee any issues contained in this report to relevant scrutiny committees if you feel further scrutiny is needed also. So this is a 6-monthly report that we bring to you, so I'm sure most of you are fairly familiar with this report by now, so I won't go into too much detail, but just to give you a quick overview of the report itself. So in Appendix 1 you will find updates on progress made in implementing local audit recommendations. So these are recommendations provided specifically to us. And so these recommendations here are deemed as open, meaning that progress is still underway to address these recommendations. And this includes a mixture of some that you will have seen before and then also some new ones for this reporting round. In Appendix 2, you'll find the National Audit Wales reports and recommendations, and also the management response to those. So as these are national recommendations, the recommendations may not always be wholly relevant to us as an authority, but we do still feel it's important that we respond to these and show the committee the response provided by that management team, and then also implement any action needed. And then finally in Appendix 3 you'll find closed local audit recommendations. So these are deemed as closed as we feel that the recommendations provided to us have been adequately addressed. And so that's when they do move from open to closed, and you will see there that 2 have moved from open to closed for this reporting round. So hopefully that provides you with a brief overview, but also happy to take any questions anyone may have.
Thank you, Hannah, much appreciated. Before going to questions, just to check with Richard, did you want to make any additional comments, please?
No, thank you, Chair. Hannah set the report out and happy to help answer any questions from the committee.
Good, okay. Chair's privilege, let me make a couple of minor observations then. So we have a couple of actions with due dates in March and April, which is clearly sort of very close in terms of time. Do you have any observations to make at this time, Richard or Hannah, in terms of whether we'll be able to close out those actions in accordance with those timescales?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I think, as you'll see here, a lot of those that are coming up are ones relevant to myself and Richard and our work that we do. And so I think we can say that we are quite confident that we will be able to close those recommendations. I think for those others that are there, I think, again, from what we have discussed with relevant officers as we've signed off this report, they will be aware of those deadlines. And so I'm sure that if they had any issues in meeting those deadlines, that we would have been able to raise it as part of this report. But obviously, as this is a 6-monthly report, you will be provided on any progress and any issues faced in the next reporting round if anything hasn't gone to plan. But I don't know if Richard wants to come in there and add anything.
I think Hannah's covered it. Obviously, a lot of those, as Hannah rightly says, sits with Hannah or I to complete, so we can give committee that assurance. I think it's also right to highlight the importance of the completion dates in our work, because they're the ones that allow us, particularly Hannah and I, role to hold others to account for delivery.
Yeah.
Sometimes the nature of the response needed to audit recommendations will mean that we need to adjust our process, but also then continue to review the effectiveness of that arrangement in terms of making the difference made. So sometimes those some of those timescales can be ongoing, and I think that's something we'll continue to keep a close eye on when we're looking to complete this report, so we can provide you with, and ourselves, assurance that we are completing things within timescales. But just want to emphasise the importance of those in terms of our holding ourselves to account, really, in terms of meeting those recommendations and delivering the actions we've set ourselves to achieve. But as Hannah says, we will update you in the next report if those haven't been achieved, revise timescales and explain why if needed, as we've done with a couple of things in this report before you today.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, that's helpful to have a prospective view about confidence and ability to meet forthcoming timelines is quite helpful as well, this committee, because this committee then can add some weight to your encouragement of officers to ensure that those actions are addressed in good time. Thank you for that. Can I, before going to members of questions, can I just check with Steve? Steve, clearly Order Wales has a view in terms of the adequacy of these actions, both in terms of their robustness and also timeliness. Do you wish to make any comment at this stage, please?
I will, thank you, Chair. No, just to endorse it in many ways, really. I have been in touch with my performance audit colleagues who were unfortunately unable to attend this meeting to get their view really on this paper. And it is in line with our Audit Wales understanding, but there will be some follow-up work on some areas of this, which we will determine and have a look at the progress made against the recommendations in a bit more detail, a lot more detail really, and we will follow up accordingly if there is anything we need to report. But it isn't, so in a nutshell, it is in line with our understanding, but the caveat is there might be some additional work in terms of checking the reality, I guess, in terms of the progress made.
Thank you for that, Steve. If I could go to members for any comments or questions they have, please. We go to Sue-Ann in the first instance, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question relates to Appendix 1 and in particular around the organisational development framework for purpose, on purpose. And I think that's something that's under the financial sustainability, but it also seems to me to be relevant to the use of performance information and performance management arrangements. And I guess my question is, well, it's to you, Chair, as well as to officers, the role of the committee, this committee in looking at that information and, can we have some information to explain the nature of this comprehensive change programme, please?
If I may answer that initially. So Peter Davis, Deputy Chief Executive, did kindly share a slide deck which set out further information on FPOP and how it was intended to be used across the organisation. So I was given some information on it, but I do echo some of your comments around maybe this committee should have full information in terms of what the programme actually is, what it aims to achieve, and how it intends to further develop the culture and operating modus of this organisation. So I can see Peter Davis online, but John, maybe in the first instance, John Davis, could you just comment upon whether you think it appropriate this committee could have further information on FPOP, possibly by means of a briefing session?
Thank you, Chair. I can just see Kath Fallon has joined us in the chamber, so if initially I can hand over to her as a starting point, Chair. Thank you.
Of course, yes.
Good afternoon, members. Kath Fallon, Head of Strategic Change, Partnerships and Procurement. Good afternoon. I've actually literally just walked out of People Leaders Workshop talking about For Purpose, On Purpose. So it's a strategic improvement change programme. We are in the process where we have an organisation development framework that we've produced that's been shared with members. We are developing a delivery framework with some performance measures, which we've been discussing with our colleagues in the performance and assessment team. It's very much in the early stages of launching with the organisation. We've established a change agent network, so all those officers within the authority working on change projects. They've met initially, but we have our proper first sort of network meeting with them next week, where we'll be encouraging everybody to get together to start talking about all the different projects they're working on, to see if we can power up some projects. So where people are working on, say, for example, a technology project, there'll be lessons that all of them have learned, so how can they benefit from that? That will then enable us to actually start to understand where any gaps are in terms of the ambitions of the authority. So we have 7 themes ranging from sort of our early intervention and prevention measures, our sustainable financial platform, how we adapt, say, technology, how we attract and maintain the best talent. So 7 different themes. And we will be working on that now as we start to establish a programme management office and give some sort of rigidity and some transparency and compliance to those different projects, so we can actually start to measure projects against each other and the overall impact of the change programme for the authority, and also to start to encourage all officers who have an idea, it's open to everybody, to come forward to start talking about their ideas for change and how we can move forward as a collective.
Okay, thank you, Kath. And I think you made reference to the fact that elected members have been given some information on this programme. I don't think the same applies to lay members. So I wonder, Kath, you could share some information with lay members of this committee, or indeed all members of the committee, about, a bit more information on the programme itself, please. That would be much appreciated. And I see Phil's hand up. Go to Phil then, please, for his observations.
All of us, please, Kath.
Yes, of course.
Okay, and then the open question is recognising what I understood Kath to say, was clearly far-reaching in nature, pretty aspirational, may I suggest. There's a question mark about how this committee should be engaged in this work, in respect of understanding how the programme is being established, what it's looking to deliver, and of course its successes. So I think it's an open question for this committee. So do members have any comments, observations on, I'm going to call it FPOP, I'm quite sure what Kath called it, or indeed any wider points on the update we've heard so far? Colin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, not on FPOP, because it says that we're not particularly cited on that. But I was going to say at page 12 of the report, which is 88 in the pack, talking about commissioning services, there's a date April 2026, and I'm not quite certain from the update what we're going to expect at that date. I presume it's not a strategy. It looks like an organizational or organizations coming together in order to do that. Could that be clarified?
Okay, thanks, Chair.
So, yeah, Richard, please have a go.
Yeah, and Kath may have walked in an opportune moment as well for this one. But just to be clear on the action update we gave to the committee at this November meeting as well, the intention is to bring back to you a draft or developed version of a whole authority commissioning framework and approach. So the action there describes how we intend to progress this in partnership with Ardle, but also potentially other councils within the region, and subject to the outcomes of those discussions. Intention is then to bring an initial stage or draft framework, draft approach to you for you to consider at your April meeting. So that'll be I guess, the product that the committee will be reviewing. But as I said at the start, and the link back to your question, Chair, about timescales, that's something we'll keep under review, determining at the appropriate time once those conversations are worked through with partners and conclusions drawn.
Thank you, Richard. Phil, please.
Yeah, sorry to come back. It just struck me. Are we due to have probably John or Pete can answer this? Some sort of review or report on how the relationship with Ardell is progressing, or is that one for performance and overview?
I don't know who's able to answer that question. Peter Davis, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Peter Davis, Deputy Chief Exec, Statutory Director for Resources, for those online. To Councillor Murphy's question, I think it's probably more a matter for performance and overview scrutiny. I think, as is always the case, in just making sure we're clear across, I guess, the scrutiny committee, and particularly P&O and the scope of a governance and audit committee. Just understanding, I guess, the things that may rightly take the interest of a governance and audit committee, but I think it's likely to be the P&O scrutiny committee in the first instance. I know Richard, who's obviously with us from the performance angle, we will, as part of the self-assessment report, provide feedback as part of our update in terms of progress with the enabling strategies, of which the procurement strategy is one. So that'll be working its way through in June, July time. And I guess to the extent that the committee's got an interest in exploring that further within the scope of its remit, then it's entirely appropriate.
Okay, thanks, Pete.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, observations on this paper, please? No, in which case we can note the actions, and please record this committee's general satisfaction with the update so far and progress made. Thank you. Move on to the next agenda item, the next that being Item 7, the Treasury Management Activity Report for Q3. Could I welcome Dan Francis to the meeting? Dan, I think it's over to you to introduce the item, ably supported by John Davis, our Head of Finance. But over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Daniel Francis, Finance Business Partner. Pleased to present the Treasury Management Activity for Q3 of the 25-26 financial year, following on from the Treasury Strategy, which was approved by Council in March, quarters 1 and 2 in July and November, respectively. Over the quarter, the UK economy experienced slowing momentum, with GDP growth easing from 0.3% in Q2 to just 0.1% in Q3. Inflation reduced to 3.2% in November, while unemployment rose to 5.1%. Against this backdrop, the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee voted narrowly to cut bank rates to 3.75% in December. The authority's borrowing and investment position remained broadly stable over the quarter, with only minimal movements reflecting routine refinancing and normal cash flow timing. Total borrowing increased by 3.6 million over the quarter to 182 million, reflecting the timing and temporary borrowing taken slightly ahead of schedule in loan maturities. This enabled us to secure more favourable short-term rates. The modest net increases occurred alongside the refinancing of some borrowing, with 8 million of new long-term PWB loans taken. This allowed the authority to lock in competitive fixed rates. These combined movements contributed to the average cost of borrowing falling marginally from 3.72% to 3.69%. Investment balances also saw only minor changes, rising from 11.7 million to 12 million. Returns remained steady at 4.56%. Benchmarking continues to show a credit risk profile remains strong, with an AA credit rating and a credit score of 4.45. The authority's liquid investments held in money market funds, bank deposits and government instruments have seen their average rate of return ease slightly over the quarter, falling from 4.18% to 4.11%. This reduction is in line with the decrease in bank rate during the period and the subsequent drop-off in short-term market rates. The slight reduction in liquid investment returns was offset by the continued strong performance of the authority's externally managed pooled fund investments. During the year, these funds have generated £169,000 in income, delivering a return of 5.48%, alongside unrealised capital gains of £247,000, equivalent to 5.99%. As a result, the lifetime unrealised capital loss of these investments is reduced to £141,000. The authority will continue to monitor these funds closely to identify appropriate opportunities for future exit should market conditions become favourable. The authority continues to ensure that all our investments counterparties remain aligned with its responsible investment approach by confirming their ongoing commitment to the 2 ESG charters still in use. This follows the suspension of the Net Zero Asset Management Initiative earlier in the year. We also maintain a dedicated ESG-specific money market fund, which delivered a rate of 3.8% at the end of the quarter, compared to an average of 3.88% across all money market funds. The authority's non-treasury investments continue to provide important diversification of income. Latest forecasts show these investments are expected to generate $562,000 of net income, equivalent to 1.99% return, representing a continued positive contribution to service funding. A more detailed report on commercial investments will come to performance and overview scrutiny in due course. Overall, bond investment performance has remained favourable throughout the quarter, with returns holding up well in a falling rate environment. Over the quarter, all prudential indicators were comfortably met. We're happy to take any questions from members.
Thank you, Dan. Questions or comments, please? Phil.
Only quick, Chair. I see we're getting very close to our 2% return on our investments, which is very pleasing given the last couple of years. The main question I've got, everything seems to be going very swimmingly, and I've always had confidence in the way you deal with this. But from your own point of view, is there anything that is causing you some concern that you think we ought to be aware of?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, as I mentioned, we continue to monitor the pooled funds. At the moment, it's still a net loss we'd have to recognise if we were to dispose of them. So, although recent growth is positive, we continue to monitor those with an opportunity to get out at the right time, offset with the sort of continued strong income performance there.
Well, capital losses and gains on those investments are only going to be realised if they're cashed in, aren't they? So.
Yeah, that's right, Councillor.
Thank
you.
Thanks. Go to Tony, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, our Castlegate Business Park has been trotting around just below what it ought to be for a while, and it's on our work programme to be evaluated the next number of months or years. What is your view on getting Castlegate Business Park into a positive area?
Can I go to Peter Davis? Well, John,
yeah,
I've got a Peter Davis. He's got his hand up. He wishes to respond.
I'm happy to defer to Peter, given his role there, Chair. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Reeson. So just to reiterate, I think the point that Dan touched on as he was presenting the report. So obviously with the revised governance arrangements subsequent to us stepping down the investment committee proper, because we've not seen to any commercial investments or activity since our acquisitions of Castlegate Business Park and Newport Leisure Park, and that responsibility transferred in part to Governance and Audit Committee to the extent that it needed to lean in, but foremost and with Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee. As Dan touched on, we have responsibility to, at the very least, annually report into the committee. We'll be doing so in April. I think it's scheduled for at their April meeting. we will look to provide full update just in terms of not just the performance, but obviously our approach, our continued approach and strategy with regards to those investments. Councillor Eason's right to highlight the fact that we have, and it's an important point to be clear, not just with the committee, but just for any public view. We are covering the costs of borrowing for both of those investment properties. We continue to do so. Clearly, we take a position as part of budget setting each year in terms of the level of associated return above borrowing that we feel the council can achieve. We've had an improving situation in recent couple of years on Newport Leisure Park. I think we've only got one vacant unit to fill now, and our investment returns are heading certainly into positive territory to benchmark return. Castlegate's, I think it's been commented on before, it's been a more difficult trajectory given the loss of Mitel as an anchor tenant a few years ago, but obviously we've taken positive steps in terms of expanding the occupation of established tenants at Castlegate. Nick Keys, as head of landlord services, has worked with the wider team, agents and the like, to market the property differently and in different ways. I think the Mon spaces, which are the sort of bespoke, fit for purpose sort of spaces, have become very popular because of what they allow to entrance into the market and startups. But notwithstanding that, I think we've been carrying about 30 to 40,000 square foot of vacant space, which, to Councillor Eason's point, is the thing that's continuing to hold us below benchmark return. On the one hand, we might be seen as being slightly overly optimistic, I guess, in terms of some of our budget projections in recent years, to the extent that we feel that we've been able to outperform them. But it's just to highlight that that remains an ongoing challenge, and it's probably worth just noting, just for the record, because John will be bringing the period through 3 budget monitoring through and to performance and overview scrutiny at the same time of our draft budget setting in a couple of weeks' time. Those papers will soon be released. There is one tenant that is within Castlegate at the minute, which has accrued a level of arrears, and that we're currently working with at the moment in order to reach a satisfactory sort of conclusion to those arrears being repaid. So yeah, I think it's acknowledged we're falling below benchmark returns. There are some potential future opportunities on the horizon. I think we've got to recognise that one of our significant tenants is Microchip, who is one of the important pieces of the jigsaw within the South East Wales region to do with compound semiconductor cluster, which the chair will probably be aware of regardless, given his role on the Governance and Audit Committee for Cardiff Capital Region. And obviously there are future opportunities around that sector and the sector growth that could equally play back into Castlegate in a positive way. So it's not all a negative lens, Councillor Eason. And as is always the case with their investment properties, it is a case of managing your tenancies and ensuring that your voids are kept to a minimum and that you're keeping up towards benchmark return as much as possible.
Yeah, there's a reasonable question marks about whether it should be used for retail in competition with Calico Town Centre. That's been a problem, I know. But I think Castlegate is an important flagship for that area. We've got to try and keep it going.
I agree completely, and a short response this time rather than the longer one I've just given. I'd agree with that. We need to determine, I think, some of the whether we look to attract, I think, complementary business sectors into Castlegate in order to really deliver, I guess, in our corner of the region and in Monmouthshire, that real level of stimulus of growth in high growth sectors.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any final questions or comments before we move on, please? No, in which case, thank you, Dan, for the paper. Thanks for the introduction, and this committee can safely note that update. Moving on then, moving on to the next agenda item. Next agenda item is the National Fraud Initiative exercise. The National Fraud Initiative exercise 24-25, and I've handed over to Jan Furtek, our Chief Internal Auditor, to introduce the paper. Over to you, Jan.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. So the National Fraud Initiative, or the NFI, matches data across organisations and systems to help public bodies identify fraud and any overpayments. So the NFI is led by the Cabinet Office and also by Audit Wales. On a biannual basis, Monmouthshire County Council has a statutory responsibility to submit data to the system relating to payroll creditors, creditor payments, housing waiting lists, council tax reduction scheme, concessionary travel passes, resident parking permits and taxi drivers. An annual submission of council tax and electoral registration is also submitted in each December. So my report that's been submitted to committee today looks at the details the savings attributed from the current NFI exercise. So that's related to the 2024 data upload. This is released through the NFI Secure application throughout January 25, and then Monmouthshire has the responsibility to promptly review the returned data matches and report outcomes directly back to the NFI. So the internal audit team are responsible for coordinating the exercise and conducting sample checks on a number of matches, especially those which have been deemed to be very high or high risk. The Shared Benefits Service have the responsibility for reviewing data matches relating to the council tax reduction scheme and housing benefits. So I can confirm data was submitted to the NFI ahead of the statutory deadline. However, it's important to note that following legislative changes, the NFI required the council to submit 2 additional sets of social care data. That was the private supported care home residents and personal budgets, or sometimes known as direct payments. Originally, these were required to be submitted with the other data sets in November 24. However, due to delays passing the required legislative changes in Parliament, the upload was delayed until November 25. Those resulting data matches have very recently been returned back to the Council, and we are starting our way to work through those. It must be noted that despite submitting the required social care data ahead of the deadline, a number of concerns have been raised with management regarding the data quality, and we can confirm that has been raised as an issue for consideration within the bill for the new finance module of the new social care management system. As of the 1st of December, when gathering the information for this report, it was pleasing to note that Monmouthshire has, in conjunction with the Shared Benefits Service, have made excellent progress and have processed 98.6% of the returned matches. The expectation from Audit Wales is that the exercise is completed as much as possible prior to the 31st of March, and therefore we are very much on track to meet this. The savings reported as of that date are included in the report, which detail overall outcomes of £120,255. It must be noted that at the moment the majority of the savings and errors identified, as well as most of the Cabinet Office estimated savings, specifically 116,000, are attributable to blue badge parking permits that remained active on the system despite the permit holder having passed away. So they are more in error than unidentified fraud. It is therefore assuring to report that no major frauds have been identified through the current exercise, and considerable time have been spent by the Council in reviewing the data matches. This should provide the Governance and Audit Committee with comfort and assurance that the Council has appropriate fraud detection arrangements in place and a proactive approach is being taken to fraud detection. In terms of the overall outcomes produced by the NFI, I had a meeting with the Audit Wales NFI lead last week, where they provided us with a summary of the savings and data produced by the exercise since April 2022. This shows that Monmouthshire Council have reported nearly £827,000 in savings over that period through the use of the NFI system. These savings are predominantly made up of savings attributed to council tax, both single person discount and council tax reduction schemes. But there have also been some savings due to duplicate creditors matches and blue badge savings. Given this data was only recently provided, it's intended that I bring a fuller update to this on this to committee, and I intend to do that within the next review of the Council's fraud risk assessment later on this year, which will be once the current NFI programme has been completed. So overall, there's an indication that our internal control systems are operating to a satisfactory level through the use of the NFI system, and as a result, the potential for fraud against the authority is being minimised as much as possible. So happy to take any questions on this report. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, much appreciated. I'll go to Sarah first, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Jan, for the report. I was just wondering whether this exercise would pick up or in fact covers any discrepancies regarding second homes and empty homes now that they are treated differently for council tax purposes.
So there's no specific data sets for empty homes that's been uploaded, but the data would be used to identify if there's any duplicate matches in terms of council tax reduction scheme, and if people have applied for benefits that they shouldn't have. It would be quite difficult as part of this because it is just data matching between people that have applied. So the majority of the council tax reduction scheme data matches would be where somebody has applied for single person discount, but there's 2 people living at the property on the electoral register. So those are the majority of those data matches. In terms of empty homes, I think it would be more difficult to be able to identify that, but we're obviously looking for any ways that we can identify and minimise fraud.
But in second
Thank you. I think Steve.
Yeah, it's entirely
Steve?
correct. Jan's comments there were absolutely correct, but I do understand, I've been in contact with colleagues, that whilst it's not currently encapsulated within the NFI exercise, the Cabinet Office are exploring widening the scope to include it in future NFI exercises, and the working group, if it hasn't already been set up, it will be set up to explore this in terms of its scope and the technical considerations in terms of taking it forward. So the answer is not yet, but watch this space, really.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or observations, please? Phil.
Yeah, you mentioned the collaboration with Torvine, and they're obviously looking at the single person discount and various other associated items. Any idea when you're likely to get some sort of response from them as to the scope or the measures they're taking? I know you're going to submit a report, but you know, just how much are they going to contribute to it?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councillor Murphy. So we've got a pre-planned meeting next week with the officer in the Shared Benefit Service who is the leading on the counter-fraud aspects from them. So we're going to discuss with them as to how far along the process they are. In terms of the figures that I provided in my report relating to the NFI main exercise each year, the majority of the data matches responsible for by the Shared Benefit Service have already been reviewed. I think there's only a very small number that is still outstanding. The next piece of work then is to review the annual council tax compared to electoral register data, but that only became released earlier on this month because that was a December upload. So the meeting next week was to discuss the timeframes for them completing that exercise.
Thanks, Jan.
Thank you. Tony.
Sorry, my phone's off. Since 1996, in Wales, there's been fraud of £56.5 million found. That's about £2 million a year. What action has been taken in respect of that average £2 million a year of fraud? Has been the police involvement, or what? What has been done?
I'm not sure where you're getting those figures from, Councillor Eason, but in terms of identified fraud, sometimes it can be an error, sometimes it can be fraud. It depends on the actual reasoning behind it. So obviously certain frauds can be reported through the DWP and HMRC, and they can obviously have the statutory powers to investigate as well. If it is an identified fraud that Monmouthshire has concerns of, especially with our suppliers, then of course we would make that referral into Gwent Police as is necessary, and as we have done when we have identified frauds, not just through the NFI scheme but through our general counter fraud work. And I'm sure my colleagues across Wales would be doing exactly the same.
That figure's on 3.1, 56.5 million across Wales in the last 30 years. Yeah.
Okay. If
Okay,
I
thank you,
may,
Chair.
no, thank you. So, if I may, on a possibly similar point, I understood you to say, Jan, considerable time and effort has been expended on reviewing this data provided by the NFI exercise. And as a consequence, we've identified 154 errors, 1 fraud, and aiming to recover circa £1,800. If my summary is correct, do you think that offers good value for money?
Thank you for that question, Chair. I suppose the committee needs to get the positive assurance, the fact that we are only identifying that level of fraud across Monmouthshire, and that would mean our internal control system is effective, which is obviously effective via a number of different routes rather than just the internal savings that have been offered by the NFI scheme. And that is not to say that there's potentially more savings down the track that we could identify through the project. And as Steve mentioned, there is scope for reviewing the NFI itself to encourage more participation and new data matches. And as I mentioned, that there was 2 new data sets that have appeared this year for us to data match against as well. So it is a constant moving target. But like I said, it's more the positive assurance for committee that we're not finding that level of fraud.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's a good answer, and I think the answer we wanted. So, recognising that there's a preventative element to this work, of course, and it does give us a level of assurance over the existing quality of our controls. So, thank you for that. Are there any further questions or comments before we move on, please? No, and just to confirm, Jan, I think be very pleased to see that paper you referred to, as it'll give us a better insight in terms of potential fraud or error within the organisation. So look forward to receiving that paper in due course. Okay, if you could move on, please, to the next agenda item. Just need to get there. That being the forward work plan. Do members have any questions or comments on that work plan? If not, we will duly note it. Okay, duly noted. Moving on to item 10. Item 10 is the minutes of a previous meeting. I'm content with minutes. I've already sort of provided some minor comments to Wendy. Unless there's any voices to the contrary, I will assume this committee is content with those minutes and approve them as appropriate.
Yeah.
Happy to move, Chair.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And finally, item 11, just to note the next date of next meeting, which is 26th of Feb at 2 p.m. Unless there's any final comments from members, can I say thank you for your contribution, thank you for officers for attending, and I will see you soon.
60 seconds to spare, Chair.
Oh, great timing as always.
Oh, wonderful,
Take care.
wonderful.
Thank you, Chair.
See you,
Cheers.
folks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ta-ra.